I finally saw my second favorite band of all time, Mastodon, live for the first time, and I definitely have a lot of thoughts. We're going to dive in and talk about it. And just to be honest and upfront here, this is a review of the concert, of course, but also some of my thoughts on the whole Brent Hinds, who was a member since the inception, and him leaving earlier this year. I definitely have some thoughts about that as well in terms of talking about this review of my very first time seeing them live, because I could have seen them easily many times before this when Brent was in the band. I just never did it, and I hate the fact that I never did. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's talk about it. So, got to the show. I knew beforehand what the set list was because when they started this tour, they played a set, and I asked the subreddit for Mastodon, of course, Mastodon subreddit. That's what I'm trying to say. Blah. It's been a long day. I asked them, do they change the set list when they go on tour? Because a lot of bands do change their sets from time to time when they're in a tour or whatever. And a lot of them said typically they don't when they're actually on a tour. If it's like a one-off show, it may be different. So I knew going in what the set was going to be. I wasn't a big fan of the songs they chose overall, but I grew to love the set list more because a lot of the songs they were playing, I'm like, well, they could have easily opted out for something else, which a lot of the times when I was thinking that, it's a lot of the stuff that Brent wrote or at least had a writing credit for, and he had a lot of singing on those particular songs I was thinking I wanted to hear live. But of course, since he just left a few months ago in the parting of ways, regardless of what exactly happened, we don't know exactly sure, they weren't going to be performing a lot of those songs. And so the very few vocal parts he would have had on this set, Troy, who is the bass player, who also is a vocalist in the band, sang those parts. Like I said, very minimal parts. I think it was 2 Brent vocal parts that were on this set that Troy actually did live. So I knew going in what to expect. But I was still excited because I wanted to hear them live. I wanted to support them. So going in, Periphery opened the show for this tour, the Infinite Arc Tour, and it was a co-headlining with Mastodon and Coheed and Cambria. Periphery opened, which was like their special guest of the tour. I had heard of Periphery over the years, didn't really hear much of their music, had no idea anything they were playing. I was like, okay, the crowd seemed to enjoy it for the most part, but they were just kind of waiting for them to get on because they're here for the 2 kind of co-headlines. So the buildup was definitely there. I was excited. I was also kind of like bummed because Brent wasn't there because he is my favorite, or he was my favorite member of Mastodon. And a lot of his music he wrote with Mastodon, like a lot of the stuff he had writing credits for, I actually favor those songs mostly over the rest of the material. Even though there's a lot of Mastodon songs he doesn't have any writing credit for that I do love. But a lot of the stuff he has vocal lines, like he has vocals on and writing credits, I really gravitate towards those more for some reason. I'm not sure why. But I was still excited. The whole set was overall pretty damn good. They knocked it out of the park. I definitely have some thoughts on that for sure. Let me pull up the set list actually here. They opened Tread Lightly, which is a song off of, I believe it's Once More Around the Sun. And they actually, surprisingly enough, because they played 14 songs, they actually covered at least one song each from each of their albums. The only thing that's not here is Call of the Mastodon, which was like their very first kind of like rough kind of like demo, of really early, like the very first songs they ever came up with, and the Cold Dark Place, the 2017 EP. But everything else was essentially covered. You have one song from 4 albums, and then you have 2 songs from 2 of the records, and then 3 songs from the 2 of the albums. So there's at least some sort of coverage there. The standout songs, for my personal opinion, was Megalodon, which is off Leviathan. I love that track. It's so good, and I was so excited to hear it live in person. It was so good. And More Than I Could Chew, which is off of Hush and Grim, the newest album, and they're claiming at the live show, they were saying that they're going to be writing a new record, including with Nick, who is the guitarist on tour right now in replace of Brent, and definitely have some thoughts about that in terms of his solo work, but anyway, so they're writing a new record. But Megalodon and More Than I Could Chew were the standout songs, and Blood and Thunder was great to close out, and I knew that was going to go in. Obviously, I knew the whole set, but Blood and Thunder, it makes a lot of sense why that's the final song on the set. Before we move on to everything else, in terms of my thoughts overall about the actual show, like I said, it was pretty damn good. I didn't stay for Coheed and Cambria. They were the closers. I know one song from that band, and it's from Rock Band. I think it's called like What Home or something, or Welcome Home, or whatever that song is. And when I looked at their actual set, even though I didn't recognize any other songs, it was the very last song, and it was already 9 o'clock. I'm like, you know what? I could stay and support Coheed and Cambria, but I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go to the hotel and relax with my wife. We're gonna go and relax and do some reading and snack and all that kind of stuff. I don't need to sit here for another hour because who knows how long it's going to take for them to tear down Mastodon stuff for Cody and Cambria to come out. And I don't want to go out with it because it was a pretty big venue. So I'm like, you know what? Cody and Cambria, they still got my money for the tickets and everything, but I didn't stay and it was fine. So if that's blasphemy, that's fine. I was there for Mastodon. I supported Mastodon. I still paid my ticket, so they still got my money, even though I wasn't there to listen to them. It's fine. Anyways, so I enjoy listening to them live. A lot of their songs, like I created a playlist off of Apple Music of the entire set and was listening to it a couple times. Actually listened to it on the way to the show that night in the car. So I grew to love the set more, even though it wasn't the set list I wanted. It wasn't some of the songs I wanted to hear. They did a great job, though. They crushed it. Stage presence, lighting, effects. They have these cool visuals on the back. Really, really cool. The one thing I'll say about Nick, who is the guy replacing Brent in this whole situation. Now, what we had found out as this tour was going on, because his first ever live performance with Mastodon was not received well at all, at least by people on the subreddit for Mastodon, because some of the videos are coming out and him performing the solos. He's not performing Brent's solos live. He is performing his own interpretation of the solos, and his very first performance was criticized heavily, saying, oh my god, this is a train wreck. His solos that he's attempting over where Brent would be playing a solo, him doing his own solo work, it's a disaster. It's not fitting with Mastodon at all. It has now gotten better from people who were saying, so when I went in live to see them in person, of course, I was curious to see how this was going to go. Nick did overall a decent job, a solid job, if you will, with his own solos where Brent's would have been for the songs. There were some songs he definitely was doing a better job, but there was other times where he's doing just too much. And I understand, Brent, at times when he was writing solos for Mastodon, a lot of them were really flashy and a lot of stuff like going crazy, but it seems like Nick was just doing too much at times. There was a lot more tapping at points going on, and just parts where Brent is kind of going in more of a slow kind of like holding those notes out, where Nick holds a note and then he starts like adding just a bunch of shit, and you're just like, okay, I understand. Like, I'm pretty sure the rest of the guys told him, hey, we don't want you to perform Brent's solos like they were, because that's what happened when Ben Eller from who's from YouTube performed the one show he did with Mastodon. I think it was Tool in the Sand or something. It was some sort of like a festival. It was a one-off show they did before this tour started, and Ben was actually performing the solos, and he was actually performing lead guitar on that show, and he pretty much played Brent's solos to almost to a T. And there's very few videos, but when you could hear, like, Ben was doing as well as he could, performing Brent's solos to the exact of what you'd expect. But I'm assuming when they brought Nick in, they didn't want him to do that. They didn't want him to copy Brent's solos live, which is an interesting direction, because a lot of bands, when you bring in new guitarists, they perform those solos like they're supposed to off the record for the most part. So to tell him not to do that, it's kind of interesting to say that, but he did a solid job. But it's a lot, not a lot. I would say probably half of it didn't feel right. It just felt kind of weird. And I think it's because, oh, well, you're used to that solo on that song. You're used to it being like played this way, and you're used to it sounding this way. So when someone comes in and does something different, it's throwing you off. Yeah, it does. But you would think if you're going to play your own kind of solo and not play the guitar solo from Brent live in a performance like that, you think you would maybe try to tailor your solo more towards kind of the vibe of what his was, and not kinda, and then the rest of it is just going crazy and all this shit and trying to be all flashy and show off. And maybe that's not what he was trying to do, but it definitely comes across that way to me. But it didn't really ruin the experience for me, because the solos, I keep saying solos, the guitar solos were not like obviously the biggest thing of the whole show. It was everything encompassing together. I would say out of 10 being the best, I would say the show's probably an 8, I would say. Maybe a 7.5, just because there were some songs I wanted to hear live, but obviously it makes sense why they didn't, because they don't have that third singer. Nick is not singing. Bill is screaming, who's the rhythm guitar player. He is kind of doing the growls, screaming a little bit, but more to like growling off Blood and Thunder at the very end. He's hardly doing any vocals live. It's really down to Troy, the bass player, and down to Braun, the drummer. So to pull out a lot of songs, including Brent's vocals, it's going to put a lot more pressure on them to perform them, which Troy was really only picking up the 2 vocal moments from Brent on the songs they already picked anyways when they were live at the show. So maybe down the road, maybe they'll start implementing more of the stuff that includes Brent's vocals in the mix, but maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe the point is that since he's out of the band, we're not going to be performing a lot of his music, or at least the stuff that he co-wrote with him, because it wasn't like Brent brought in a bunch of songs and he only got the writing credits on a lot of songs or whatever that he was vocally on, but he has a writing credit, including with some of the other members. Like, they were collaborating and everything on certain stuff. So maybe at some point we'll get more of those songs that Brent had more of a contribution to in the studio, live in person, maybe down the road, which would be cool, but maybe not. Maybe it won't happen. Anyways, I'm rambling quite a bit in this video, but I just wanted to say I saw them live. I'm glad that I did. I actually went back and was scrolling through like their past tours where I could have potentially seen them and saw the set list and went, damn. Because when they performed, at least, you know, where I was living at the time in North Carolina, they played a show that was literally in my town, and I did not go for some stupid reason. And they performed a couple of songs for the very first time live at that show, including Gigantium, which is the closer of Hushed and Grim. And I'm like, oh my God. But thinking back on it, would I have appreciated that show in that time years ago like I would have now? And the answer is probably no. I loved Mastodon for a very long time, but I never really grew to understand, at least, and appreciate, and finally admit they are my second favorite band of all time until literally a few months ago. So I would not have appreciated it as much as I would have now. So that's the issue with all of this. So anyways, I'm rambling. I'm going to go. This is my kind of quick thoughts. Not really quick thoughts, I guess, just kind of a rambling mess here, but just wanted to give my thoughts on this whole thing because it definitely is a lot, but I'm glad that I went to see the rest of the guys and support them. I hate kind of what transpired and unfolded, and it seems like unless Brent comes out and says his piece, maybe the other guys respond if they have to, depending on what is said. Unless something has come out and said, then we're never really going to truly know what happened, but I think it really boils down to Brent just kind of being done and just not being happy, and it seemed like the other guys were not happy with him as well because of how things were just kind of transpiring over time, where things were being said, he was saying stuff kind of out of line and everything, and just kind of not happy. So maybe this is best for both of the parties involved. But I'm glad I got to saw them live, and I definitely will not leave the opportunity or lose the opportunity. Can't even fucking talk today. God, I need to sleep. I need to sleep. I'm definitely not going to lose that opportunity if they come around again, unless there's something that's happening that I cannot go. I'm going to go and see them again live until I can't anymore. So, yeah. Anyways, I'm done rambling. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace out.